Yes, we are recording this and we will post this on our website. We're really excited today. This is, I don't know, episode 17 maybe of our Tuesday Zoom Talk series. It's been great. We've had so many great conversations. Today we have 3 great guests to talk about on the topic of clinics and experiential education. Why don't I let them introduce themselves now, and then we'll get started. I'll have some questions, and then everyone hopefully will join in with some great questions. So Professor Schnug, why don't you start off?
Sure, I'm Meredith Schnug. I'm a clinical associate professor and the associate director of the legal aid clinic at KU. I also teach an advanced litigation course, and I coordinate our pro bono program at the school.
So, I'll have to add that to our Q&A list of things.
And you're a mock trial coach.
Oh yeah, and that too, with you.
Professor
Phillips, I think you're next.
I'm Jean Phillips. I'm a clinical professor. I direct the Project for Innocence and Post-Conviction Remedies, and I am the director for clinical programs and experiential programs, and I am kind of a baby coach under Meredith and another professor in the mock trial program.
And Professor Schmidt?
Criminal law, and I teach other classes.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay.
I'm Jennifer Schmidt. I do a couple of things. I teach many things, legislation and public policy. So if you're interested in that, please do come talk to me as soon as the year starts. I do legislative simulation. I do a public policy practicum and such. I'm also director of the 6th semester in Washington, D.C. program and director of the field placement program. So I will probably run into you in some capacity or another. But if you're interested in anything legislative or political, please do connect with me early.
Well, that's great. And I'm Stephen Freedman. I'm the Assistant Dean of Admissions, and I'm just the MC today. So wonderful. We're going to get started, like I said, with I have some questions for our guests, but at any time, please feel free to jump in. If you have questions about current events like COVID and things like that, why don't we save those till the end of the discussion, and then I can talk about that. So that we can get a good recording here about the clinics and the 6th semester program. So let's start with, in the same order, Professor Schnug. Could you talk a little bit about the legal aid clinic and what the students do there and what the goals of the clinic are?
Sure. The legal aid clinic is one of our 3 or 4 in-house clinics, and it's available for students their 3rd year or for some 2nd semester 2Ls if they've met certain requirements. And we kind of consider the legal aid clinic our litigation clinic at KU. So it's an opportunity for students to handle cases from beginning to end. And the students serve as the primary attorneys on the case, of course, working under faculty supervision. So students have the opportunity to interview clients, engage in negotiation, and then they handle court hearings. So you all would appear in court with your client and do all of the talking with a special license from the Supreme Court that allows you to practice under faculty supervision. We're there with you and we prepare you and get you all ready for that, but it's an opportunity for you all to really be the lead attorney on cases and learn those case management skills as well as courtroom skills and a little bit of drafting work that goes along with that. Currently, the clinic does municipal defense work, so we represent clients who've been charged with municipal ordinance violations, and we also do juvenile defense work in district court. We have a really large expungement practice where we're helping expunge prior convictions and arrest records for individuals who meet the requirements under Kansas law for expungement. And then last year we developed a new program too that we're really excited about, where we're helping transgender Kansans and those who identify as non-binary change their names and gender markers on their birth certificates. That was a project that was initiated by a couple of students, and so we were able to take that on as well. So a lot of different types of work and really good experience for students toward the end of your law school career.
Yeah. And how many hours per week do students work in that?
So currently it's a 6-credit clinic, and that breaks down to about 20 hours of work per week. So it's kind of like having a part-time job with your classes, but because it is 6 credits, it allows you to take fewer classes in order to be able to work that much in clinic.
Is it a semester-long program or longer?
Yeah, it's a semester-long clinic. In decades past, it's been a year-long program, but the cases that we take on now are great because they're shorter terms, so students really can have some cases that they will work from start to finish in a semester's time. We do have an option for students who want to return for a second semester to do that. It's called Advanced Legal Aid Clinic, and that's a 3-credit option. So you work about half-time in the office, but usually students by that point are adept enough at the types of cases that we're doing that they can maintain a pretty similar caseload and just work half the hours in order to still serve the same number of people.
Brian has a great question. What's the typical class size for the clinic?
So we can take a maximum of 16 students, but usually we're around 9 or 10 students, which is a great number. Usually the students, because y'all are working in the bullpen together, we call it, it's the student work area. Usually it becomes a really tight cohort of students. We try to foster a collaborative atmosphere. Our grading is not based on a curve, and because of that, students are able to really work together. We encourage people to bounce ideas off of each other for solving problems for clients and working cases together. So I think students typically have a lot of fun while we're working hard as well.
And Doug Bartel has a great question. Do students need to apply for the clinics? Is it guaranteed placement just by enrolling in class?
So each clinic has their own application process. It's just a way of letting them know that you're interested in the clinic, and then having the clinical or field placement instructor be able to talk to you individually to make sure that you understand the specific requirements and that it will work well with your schedule.
Great. Well, great. That's a great introduction, and we'll circle back for sure and talk about that. And today we will we'll take questions about all the clinics, even though our 3 guests represent only 3. So we might not be able to go into as much detail about some of the other clinics, like the Medical Legal Partnership Clinic, but we'll definitely take questions on those and answer them to the best we can. But at the start, let's focus on what our professors know best, which is their own clinics. Professor Schmidt, we get a lot of interest about the 6th semester in DC program. Could you please describe what that program is?
Absolutely. And just before I start that, Steve, I'm happy to talk about the MLP as well. It actually
right.
under my field placement, and while I'm not a managing attorney there, I do know a lot about it, and I'm very in touch with Lindsay and Julianne there. So anyway, okay, so on to 6th semester. This is a program that sends students, 3rd-year students, to Washington, D.C. for their last semester of law school, which is why we creatively call it the 6th semester program, because it's your 6th semester of law school. The program is comprised of the following parts. You have a field placement that is 6 to 9 hours of credit. Don't worry about credit hour numbers right there. I'm just throwing it out there in case you do have that base of knowledge already. But it's basically full-time. We have programming around that, where we go and we meet lots of people in DC, talk about what it's like to practice law in and around the federal government and nonprofits, in large law firms out there, because that's where we happen to be, talk about a bunch of issues and practice surrounding DC as part of that, and meet people, social events. It's kind of fun. I get to take people to dinner, which makes me have a lot more fun than most people. And then the other part is we offer 2 classes out there. One is mandatory, one is not. The mandatory one is called a capstone course, and it is one that I teach out there, and it is just sort of the final piece on learning areas of practice, such as US Supreme Court practice, lobbying, things like that, that are unique to DC, that you're not gonna have a focused study for during your general experience in Green Hall. So those are the three different parts of the program. The credit is through KU, which is important because right now, if you would decide to go be a visiting student out in DC at George Mason or Georgetown or George Washington or any of the other non-George law schools out there, they're very expensive. And our tuition is quite a bit lower. Likewise, if you're on scholarship, that applies as well. So all of that credit is through KU, which is a big boon. If you're interested in this program, it's good to talk to me early, your first year, mid to end of your first year, definitely. And there will be info sessions for first year, second year, and then of course, third year students when you get to that point, but you need to start planning now. Now, that said, if you don't decide until your last, November of your third year, that is still fine. We can work with that. But what I want to help you do is find the internship that is perfect for you to go do, that is what you want. We've had students work at Department of Justice. We had somebody who just finished up a great internship there. We've had people work at the ASPCA. Where else? Public television, bunch of different places on Capitol Hill, including House Judiciary, Senate Ag Committee. Anyway, you get the idea. So what we want to start doing is figuring out where you want to get. If you know where it is, and if not, let's just try everything so that you end up at the end of your 6th semester program with some relevant experience, an excellent reference in the field, and hopefully a good writing sample or two and lots of connections in the area of law you want to go into. So what questions do you have for me? That's a very quick overview of what's actually a pretty complex program.
I've got a question.
Okay.
What have you seen as kind of the placement rate after people have taken part in the 6th semester of actually continuing within that area and field?
It depends on the area and field. Two things to mention about the program. One is that when I took this over, it was, let's say it was about a year old. I came in a few years ago to do it, among other things. And it was originally started as a public interest program for people who want to practice public interest law. And I deliberately don't market it that way, and I didn't design it that way because I want anybody who wants to do anything to be able to be part of it. If you want to do public interest, there are amazing nonprofits in Washington, the national headquarters to a lot of nonprofits and international locations as well. Things like World Bank, IMF, of course, are there as well. That is a great place to go. If you're interested in a big firm, it is a great place to get, be in a place you can network with people in firms, et cetera, et cetera. So I want anybody, whatever your future is, there is a place for you in DC. If you're interested in living there or even just getting experience there and coming back. Something else, I'm going to digress and then I will get back to your question in a second. The basis of the program, the best way to think of it is I am a KU law grad. And when I was here, I came from Washington, grew up in Kansas, went to Washington, DC after college, worked on Capitol Hill for a long time, came back here for law school, and had always planned to go back out to DC. I mean, I was passing through Kansas on my way back to Washington, and there was nothing to help me. And this is a long time ago in the 1990s. So anybody here, there are very few people left from when I was a student. And there wasn't much. I did all of it, did all my own placement stuff, all my own job search and whatnot. And so when this program was created, I was given the opportunity to build it into the program I wanted. And our dean has been extraordinarily generous, both with just letting me take risks and leaps that were a little untried and also thankfully financial, to let me build a program that is exactly what I think you need to build a career in Washington. That said, Washington is I think, the most competitive marketplace for lawyers. Maybe New York, maybe goes back and forth, but it is very hard to get a job out there. You've got all of your schools that are local. You're Georgetown, George Washington, George Mason, Catholic, American, Howard, UVA is there. Additionally, it is a place that a lot of people want to come when they graduate. A lot of your people from the Harvard, Yale, Stanford, Ivies. That said, if you want a job, you can find one. The idea that you're going to graduate with a job is unpredictable. We had 5 out of our 6 students this last not this year. This year, COVID, ignore it, kind of fell apart partway through the semester. We all had to come home. The year before, I had 6 students out there, 5 graduated with jobs. And 1 graduated being very close to getting a job. Most were in DC. 1 was in Baltimore, 1 was in New York. And then the rest were in DC. So it just depends who you are, how hard you work. The thing about getting a job in law, at least in and around Washington, which is where I frankly know much about, more than I do Kansas City, oddly enough, is you really have to work it. But if you work it, you will find what you're looking for eventually. Long answer, short question. Did I answer your question?
Yeah, that was really helpful. Thank you.
And really, a big focus of mine in the program is to help you build your network. Because, you know, network can be perceived as a dirty word, but it is not. All it is a support system in the professional world. And no matter what you do, you need one. And you need to start building it. And it's not just people you have met. It is people who know you, are willing to go out on a limb for you, and then you go out on a limb for them if you guys respect each other. And so we spend time, I go out a bunch of times during the semester, introduce you to people, a lot of times KU alums, sometimes they're not, who basically say, great, you're from KU. What can I do to help you? Let's talk, let's have coffee, let me introduce you to my friends. And so we do a lot of career building out there.
That's great. We have a specific question about opportunities in the health organizations and government agencies. I can recall Emory, didn't she end up in that field? Or
She did.
Yeah.
Emory Saucedo did. Trina Kane is an alum out there. I don't think you probably know her, Steve. She was probably graduated 10, 15 years ago. She's a great contact out there who works in the health field. She's in the National Health Service, is currently deployed in Baltimore. Just was made a commander actually last week. Anyway, I digress as usual. The one thing about I think most of our field placement programs, which I run one of, there are 3 others that I don't run, but the field placement program and then the DC program as well, is we actually don't really place you. You guys are going to be too advanced for me to walk in and say, oh, you know, Gina's so smart. She is wonderful and she gets all of her work done on time and she is such a joy to be around. You really need to hire her. You know, you guys are going to be a little past that. And so you have to find your own field placement. That said, I've never had a student not find any, and I actually have a student for next year who's accepted a job offer 2 months ago for those Delaney. I think Bree is close to one as well for anybody who knows them on the faculty. But then basically you start working with me when you can. We come up with ideas. We talk about how to apply. We work with the CSO. The 2 requirements to be in the program, which is a question that probably is going to be asked in a minute. One is that you have to be a student in good standing. There's no application, but please be in good standing. It's also your last semester, so if you're at risk for not passing the bar, you should not do it. You should stay back in Green Hall and worry about bar prep. That said, that's not going to be you guys. So you need to be in good standing, and the other thing is you need to have found a field placement. That is not as easy as it's not as hard as it sounds. The hard part is figuring out what you want to do and meeting all the deadlines and getting all the application materials in. But yes, health, lots of opportunities out there. You've got the Department of Health and Human Services, you have NIH, you have the CDC, you have a bunch of nonprofits who do health. So absolutely, you know,
my understanding and
health stuff.
And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the nice things about this program is that it's during the spring semester. So whereas in the summertime in DC is kind of flooded with people seeking opportunities. And of course, no one's there because they all go on vacation. In springtime, everyone's there and there's not as many people, especially people who can commit, 20 hours per week. What is the externship time commitment? I guess that's a good question.
Yeah, really good question. Absolutely, that is one advantage because in the summer it does get crazy. If you want to do a summer out there, happy to help you line that up for credit or not through the 6 semester program, that would be a different credit program that I'm not going to get into because we don't have that much time, but I'm happy to do that. Yeah, one advantage of the spring is that you work basically 35 to 45 hours a week at your internship. So you offer full-time work, which even the students at Georgetown, George Mason, et cetera, can't because they're in classes. So it's an excellent opportunity to be there every day, which is a much more valuable experience as well. It really is a work experience in your field placement. Number of hours required. This is going to get down the weeds. For every hour of field placement, you have to do 42.5 hours of work. Not my number, this is an American Bar Association number. So it depends how many hours you enroll in. You have to do 6 or 9. So anybody who's a math major can do that math. I don't know it off the top of my head, but it's basically going to be full-time for, from late January to April.
Great. And Doug Bartell asked about housing. I understand we have some housing available. Is that correct?
More or less. The undergrad KU has a great program in DC run by Dr. Loomis, if any of you are KU students, and he has run it for 34, 35 years now. All of the undergrads from KU live up in an apartment complex in Silver Spring. And Dr. Loomis has worked a deal with them. I've been up to look at the apartments because I am that concerned about you guys. I'm going to see where you're living. And basically it's a good deal for TV and internet and dishes and, basically furniture, everything you need we'll get into the weeds on it, depending on the year, anywhere from $600 to $800 a month, which is pretty good with your own room in a double or a single. So that is always out there as long as you get on it about October when he starts to work out these deals and make reservations, and that is through him. My view is that you guys are grown-ups. You are not undergrads. You are adults who live by yourselves and cook and, are responsible. So if you want to do that, that is awesome. If you don't, we've got a lot of other suggestions. At the end of the day, you do have to find your own. Again, I've never had anybody else find housing. Airbnb has a sublet side that has worked great. There's actually a women's dorm experience on Capitol Hill right by the Hart Senate office building that has been a great experience, $1,000 a month, including meals. You can't have big parties, you can't have mixed gender upstairs, but it's been a great experience for some people who want to do that. We've had people live with parents, live with friends. It works out, but you do have to start planning for it. And you'll meet with me if you're really interested in this. You will get tired of me. Because we'll talk about all this until you just are tired of talking about it.
Great. Well, thank you so much. That's a great introduction to the program. Let's turn to Professor Phillips now. Professor Phillips, do I have to unmute you? There we go. Can you talk about, you are the director of the Project for Innocence. Why don't I let you talk about it? Please share with us the program.
Sure. Before I start talking about my specific clinic, I want to give an overview to make sure everybody understands that there are really 3 different ways you can get what we call experiential learning. And at KU, you're required to get, well, actually everybody, it's an ABA requirement, is 6 hours of experiential learning. And so you can do that through an in-house clinic, which is what I run, or what working for clients under attorney supervision, and those attorneys are in the building, they are faculty within the building, so everything is inside Green Hall. Then there's the field placements, which is what DC is, and Professor Schmidt was talking about. And field placements mean you go work in a different office with a different supervisor, and the law school's faculty member is just there to assist you. You might have to report back, report some hours, do some journaling, but your work is off campus and your supervisor is not a law school faculty member. There are a few little hybrids with MLP, but I don't want to get too much into the weeds. The point is you can either be in-house in an in-house clinic, or you can be off of Green Hall in a field placement. The other type of
field placement does have a classroom component now.
Right, it does, but I mean, you're still working for another entity. You're not working under the individual supervisor who's a clinical or who's a faculty member. The third thing I want to remind you of is you can also take experiential courses, which is one of the things that Professor Schnug talked about with advanced litigation and what Professor Schmidt talked about. I feel like we were throwing around a lot of terms, and so I want to make sure you understand what all those terms are. And Professor Schmidt was talking about the public policy practicum or the legislative, when she does a legislative class, you know, there are times when those can count for experiential learning, and that is you have a fake client, you take a class, you have a fake client or a fake legislature, and you work through cases and you learn the law and you learn how to be an attorney with a fake or a hypothetical client, right? So you have those 3 different ways to get your experiences so that you kind of keep it straight in your mind when you're thinking about what you need to do for those 6 credit hours. So let's talk about the project. So the Project for Innocence has been at the law school since 1965. It is one of the oldest clinics in the nation, actually. It began as a clinic that provided legal assistance in any way, shape, or form to people who were incarcerated within the state. Currently, we do 3 things. We represent inmates who ask for our assistance who are incarcerated at USP Leavenworth, and we represent inmates who are incarcerated in any of the state penitentiaries in Kansas who ask for our assistance. And the kinds of cases that we take sort of fall into kind of 3 different categories. One is actual innocence cases, and those are different from just from what we call post-conviction cases. Actual innocence means the individual is claiming, I didn't do it, I'm actually innocent. And those cases tend to fall into, you know, you think of your DNA evidence, you think of experts, right? The arson science has changed. There's been newly discovered evidence, witnesses have recanted, eyewitnesses are bad. There's a whole host of reasons why you can end up with a wrongful conviction. And so we do a lot of actual innocence work, and we use a lot of experts in our work. You will get very familiar with understanding how forensic science works and how to engage experts and expert witnesses. The other component to the project is addressing people who have been wrongfully convicted, not necessarily because they're innocent, but because they had ineffective counsel or they had a violation of their constitutional rights. We had somebody a long time ago who had an attorney who had a pretty significant substance abuse problem, who lost everything and was living out of his car and was representing someone in a first-degree murder case, and things went terribly wrong, right? So we were able to go in and say that person deserves a new trial. So those are the kinds, and then we do a variety of other smaller kinds of issues for the inmates who are incarcerated at Leavenworth or within any of the state institutions. One of the things I would encourage you to think about when you're thinking about clinical education is it is great if you find a clinic or a field placement that is in the area of law that you want to practice, but I would encourage you to think broader than that, right? So even if you don't want to do criminal law, but if you want to do high-end litigation where you're using experts, the project is a place where you're going to learn how to use an expert witness, because you're going to have to call them, you're going to have to talk to them, you're going to have to figure out how to get evidence to them, you're going to have to figure out what questions to ask them on the stand. I mean, there's going to be a lot of those skills that get transferred. So just because you don't want to do criminal work doesn't mean you shouldn't think about the clinic, or you shouldn't think about medical legal partnership. There's a lot of transactional work that goes on at MLP. And so if you want to be a transactional lawyer, that's a place to get some of that kind of experience. So I would encourage you to think broadly about clinics and about the experience, and you know, if you find something narrow that fits your niche, that's great, but don't worry if you don't. Still take these field placements or these clinics and think about them in terms of the skill set that you will learn, that you can then transfer into whatever area. So I'm going to give you one last example, and that's the prosecution clinic or the legal aid clinic, or prosecution field placement, where you're in court all the time and you're litigating cases. If you want to be a litigator, even if you want to be a litigator in, say, insurance defense firm in Kansas City, if you can walk in and say, I've tried a case from beginning to end, right? I selected the jury, I called the witnesses, I gave opening, I gave closing, I cross-examined, I got a conviction, or I got my, whatever your result happened to be, you will be that much further ahead, even though it wasn't an insurance defense kind of case that you were working on. Those skills are really transferable. So when you're thinking about clinics and field placements, sort of think a little broadly in that sense.
Great. What specifically are students doing on a day-to-day basis in the project?
In my project?
Mm-hmm.
So it is a lot of document review, We will get cases, some of these cases are 10, 15 years old, particularly our innocence cases, and they will come to us in just ginormous banker boxes, and it's a lot of gathering. Boy, you become an investigator really fast. If you ever had any interest in being a PI, this is the place to be. You will learn how to find documents that you write, police reports. How do I get police reports? How do I use Open Records Acts? How do I get information? And it's gathering a lot of documents. It's reading those documents and scouring through them to figure out what happened below, what caused this individual to get a conviction. So we had a case where we're pretty sure this person didn't do it, and we were reading and finally, sort of buried in the middle of it, somebody figured out that the perpetrator had a hat that got left at the crime scene. That you wouldn't have figured that out because nobody put that evidence on at trial. It wasn't in the transcripts anywhere. So it was a matter of digging through the police reports until you found that, and then you can take that hat, you find the hat, and then you go have the hat tested, right? So it's a lot of really digging and deep digging into the evidence. It's a lot of finding witnesses. Although COVID puts a little bit of a wrench in that, we're having to figure out how to do our witness investigation in the land of COVID. But normally we would be out investigating, we'd be talking to witnesses, knocking on doors, trying to retrace what happened, and a lot of forensic evidence analysis.
Well, thank you. And I think Professor Phillips and the other professors raise a good point. These aren't the only clinics we offer. We also have a judicial clerkship field placement, which you can do in your first summer between your first and second year. And we have practicums with the Kansas State Legislature and also the Kansas Supreme Court. Professor Schmidt, did I misspeak?
I'm sorry, you're just slightly out of date on that. We actually do not have a practicum with the Kansas legislature.
I apologize.
No, it's all good. The ABA changed the rules a few years ago and made it untenable. I have pulled in, as part of my legislative simulation and study class, an internship in the Kansas State Legislature. So if you're interested in that, you can do that as part of my legislative simulation and study class, but you cannot get field placement credit for that otherwise. No, you are on target, Steve. The ABA just changed on us.
Okay.
So I had to adapt.
So let me ask a practical question. As a first-year law student, you're probably, you don't have to choose your classes until the summer. You have to choose your second-year classes until the summer. Is there anything during that first year, like an open house or a clinic fair, where students can talk to the different professors and find out the different ways to join these?
So we have offered 2 different sessions to inform people about clinics and field placements. One, we try to have it in the fall, although sometimes it's early in the spring semester, which is just so you want to be a whatever you want to be kind of forum. And so if you want to be a litigator, here are the things you should think about. If you want to be a transactional lawyer, here are the things you should think about. If you want to be a government lawyer, here are the things that you should think about. And it is a noon forum with a panel who just addresses the different options that are available to you, and experiential courses that will help you, get to where you want to be if you want to litigate, if you want to be an appellate lawyer, if you want to be a public interest lawyer, if you want to work for NGOs, those sorts of things. And then in the early in the second semester, your spring semester, there will be we call it a tabling. It's in the informal commons, and all of the directors are available. We have tables set up. We have pamphlets and brochures, and you can come and talk to the various directors about their programs and ask questions. And there's also a website that has a lot of this information, and it has the deadlines for applications for those clinics that require applications. And those applications are also available online for those that do require an application or have an application process. And there's a whole bunch of them, right? There's mediation, tribal law, medical legal partnership, judicial. There's an elder law field placement where you work in Kansas Legal Services doing Social Security, disability, lots of issues that elder individuals face. So there's just this broad gamut of field placements and clinics available, and all of that information is given in those 2 sessions.
Great. Also, can KU law students do more than one, or do they just do one clinic?
You're allowed up to 16 credit hours of clinic and or field placement. You cannot take them at the same time, right? So you can't be in legal aid and the project at the same time. You can't be in a field placement or the project at the same time. It's just simply too much work. And you also never know when you're going to have a conflict of interest, right? You never know when that client you're working for at MLP happens to be a law enforcement officer whose mother is in the hospital, and that law enforcement officer might also be a subject of what's going on in the project in a criminal case, right? So you have the potential for conflicts of interest are too great, and the time commitment is too great. So you have to take them sequentially, but you can take more than one.
Douglas asked a question earlier. I know we get a lot of people interested in getting experience in immigration law. I know we don't have any clinics that are solely focused on that. Are there opportunities in some of the clinics? Yeah.
Yeah, so I know that they do some in MLP, and Jennifer can talk about that in a minute, but I'm going to push. It's called The Clinic, and it's run by Rekha Sharma Crawford, and she is a wonderful immigration lawyer in Kansas City, and she does a lot of pro bono work, and her clinic is basically pro bono work. And I think, I will turn this over to Professor Schnug, I think you can do that work for part of the pro bono certificate, I think.
Yes, so the pro bono program at KU is if you are doing work that you're not being compensated for or earning academic credit for, so not like through a field placement, and you're not being paid to do it, but it is pro bono work for the benefit of the public, and we give a pretty broad definition of that, then it counts as pro bono hours. So if you're doing kind of work on the side and not through a field placement program, then you count those as pro bono hours, and our students who complete 50 hours of pro bono work during their whole law school tenure graduate with pro bono distinction, and they're honored at graduation as having earned that.
And I think, I'm going to turn this back to Jennifer, Professor Schmidt, I think that you can work for, say, Rekha Sharma Crawford, who the immigration lawyer, and get field placement credit. Can you work for a private attorney and get field placement credit?
It depends. You're welcome for the helpful answer there, Jean. Basically, the field placement, to get field placement credit at KU, you cannot be paid and you can't be working for a for-profit entity. For any kind, pardon me, of field placement credit, whether it's DC, judicial, prosecution, obviously, elder, in my field placement. The way field placements are generally arranged at KU is you've got some specific ones. We have a great prosecution field placement. We have a great judicial field placement, both of which I highly recommend, and elder and some others. Mine is just the general field placement, which if you sift everything else down, I get everybody else, which means that if you have an interest in something that doesn't have its dedicated own field placement, which would be immigration at KU, you're going to probably end up in my field placement. There are certain requirements that a placement must satisfy for both KU and the ABA, but we can talk about those in great detail when you get into KU and you're looking at opportunities. But there are lots of opportunities, like Professor Phillips said, in Kansas City. There's some nonprofits that do immigration. There also are a couple of firms that will hire people. I don't know as much about that as CSO does. I can't give credit, so that goes to Career Services Office, but there is that. We do have a couple of students who on the other side work for ICE, one in New York, one in Baltimore, and then others who work for Homeland Security. I've got somebody working for Homeland Security this summer in Kansas City. I've got one who's worked at an immigration court, although that's not this summer. So there are lots of opportunities out there around immigration. They are particularly competitive right now because it's a place that a lot of people want to work, but that is absolutely no reason to even blink. It just means you've got to think a little harder about it, but there are lots of options. Can I just, Steve, can I jump in quickly? Talk a little bit more about field placements and such. Professor Phillips talked about, it's a good way they're a good way to get skills, even if they're not on target exactly with what you want to do. They're also a great way to rule out things or to have a different experience. If you want to, you're going to go end up and work in a firm, you may want to work at KU Athletics for a summer because it would be really interesting. Or you may want to work at the MLP to learn a lot about the issues that face people who are clients of that clinic that you may not then see again. So I do have a fair number of students who do that, who just walk in and say, I want something different. What else can I learn? How can I, sort of carpe diem. So that's another way to think about what other experiences do you have when you have this time to play with.
Yes, I will jump on that. We have had people who come in wanting to be defense attorneys who leave never wanting to practice criminal law ever. We have people who come in wanting to be business lawyers who leave wanting to be defense attorneys, right? So you just never know.
Well, we're coming up on about the time when been going for about 45 minutes, which I think is a pretty good time frame. So I want to thank Professor Schmidt, Schnug, and Phillips for joining us, as well as the students who are joining us too. You asked some great questions, fantastic. And we look forward to seeing you in just about a month and a half or so as school starts. Everyone stay healthy, continue having a great summer. If you have questions more day-to-day, I'll stay on for a few more minutes to take some more questions myself. But for everyone else, thank you so much for joining, and we will see you soon.